What's up, guys? Ben here bringing you another video today. It is time for our post week 2 pre-week 3 major 2 tier list. There's been some movement. We're going to collapse some tiers, and I think it's been clear to me right now that, and it was probably clear during major 1 but got a little bit fuzzy, and then it's clear again. There's 4 teams that are very good and everybody else has a bunch of issues. So let's rank them. Let's kind of try and sort people into tiers and kind of see how the teams are shaking out as we get towards team locking in their qualification for major 2, or teams that are on the bubble and need to start getting points. All right, so this is our tier list from last week, and I do this every tier list video, but if you never watch my tier list videos, we don't do the letter thing. I think it's kind of whack. This is how I do it. We actually added a specific tier for the last video, which I'm going to remove, but this is how I normally do it. Sunday regulars are your top 2 to top 4 teams. Recently, it's been top 2. I'm gonna be honest and spoil it for you. It's gonna be the top 4 teams. Potential contenders is anybody else in the top 6 or top 8 that I think has a chance to win an event, and I'm gonna spoil that for you. I don't think so. Better than the rest I added for the last video because I wasn't sure about New York and Minnesota, but now I'm sure. So that tier is going bye-bye. Work to do. Well, the way I've done it the last couple of weeks, really since the first 2 weeks of this major, is I think they got better with the roster change. But now that we're in, I think it's more of what do I think the issues are with those teams, and are they able to solve it without a roster change and missing pieces, or teams that I don't think are going to be able to solve their issues right now and need to make a change probably after this major. So we're gonna go in kind of a weird order here. Let's start from the top down, and I'll collapse that better than the rest here in the middle, and then work our way to the bottom. All right, first up, we have the Toronto Ultra. Not a lot of activity from them last week. They played Vegas on Saturday. They took care of business 3-1 in that matchup, only dropping a real S&D in which they got actually throttled in. So I think really the only weakness right now for Toronto, if you could really point one out, is that I think there are ways that teams might be able to attack the S&D map pool, especially if this team is really struggling on Rio Search. They don't like to play high rise. And if teams can really figure them out on Invasion or Karachi, I think they're going to have an opportunity in this series, because I honestly think the top teams can kind of take control off each other. But outside of that, they seem to be like basically perfect and hard point. They're cruising on to major 2 and have a very good chance to go back to back. Next up, we have Atlanta FaZe, and a bit of an interesting week for them. This team's been a little bit unlucky that they've only played 2 matches at this point in this stage, and they've been against Miami, and then they played New York, and it went all the way to last map in which they lost 6-4. I think the key thing for me right now with FaZe and where they're at is I don't think the hard point has been very convincing the last, let's say the 10 or the last 12 hard point maps they played. And they did drop a couple of searches in this one. So if they clean up their S&D situation right now, I think they're gonna be fine. And I kind of will say, I think for FaZe is that if they continue to be solid and really good at control, the minute that they kind of get going in hardpoint, I think they're gonna be pretty hard to stop. Is that enough to take over Toronto? I don't know. But a real tough grind out one with New York that was the caliber of matches we've seen between the both the last year or 2, and I expect them to be battling going forward. I expect this FaZe team, even though their schedule ended up actually, the stage is actually ending up not being that easy because they have Rocker and Toronto here coming up next, but then they got Thieves, Boston, LAG, which they're going to win. They're going to make winners bracket, just a case of what seed they're going to get. All right, next up we have Optic Texas, and a very interesting week for them. I think even more interesting than FaZe. They played Minnesota, went down 0-2, were literally 3 deaths away from losing map 3, somehow won a control 3v12. Clutch at map 4, convincing on map 5. They grinded that one out against Minnesota. We'll talk about Minnesota in a second. And then had a pretty solid win against LAG. I'm actually going to move. Do I want to keep Optic and potential contenders? Because I still think that their S&D, I'm not convinced that this team's S&D is amazing, although they're 3-1 in this split. They've been solid, very solid in control. I actually looked it up. They haven't lost the control of the stage. Hard point back and forth. I'm gonna move them up. We're gonna move them up to Sunday regulars. We'll move New York up there in a second. I like what I'm seeing from Optic. I think they've got a very easy schedule this stage. Really, Toronto and New York at the end are the only real hard matches. They got Carolina, Boston coming up. I think they're gonna be like 5-0 before they really get to the tough ones. And I think Optic have a good seed going into the major. Will be thereabouts. Can they beat Toronto? Can they beat FaZe? Can they beat New York? Will remain to see. But I think they're now, I feel solid about them in the mix and making progress in some of the issues they've had. And the next team I'm going to move up here is New York. I'm going to put them in front. Some of y'all might say, why do I have FaZe in front of New York? New York just beat them online. I think for me, I'm just going to kind of use a tiebreaker of the last event there, since New York got last and FaZe made it runners up at that tournament. But I think amongst the top 4, it's really going to come down to who plays better on a weekend. I really wouldn't overthink the order of these 4 teams. But I think this New York team is taking a big step forward in this stage 2. I think their S&Ds continue to be dominant. They've cleaned up control quite a bit. I think they're a very good high-rise control team. Now, they did lose one control over the course of this weekend versus FaZe, but I think FaZe is probably the best control team in the game right now. And the hard point's been really good, and I've liked how they run out their map pool. So this New York team's going to be hard to beat. That was a great win against FaZe and Boston this week. They've now played 4 matches, so they're only going to play 1 a week with Miami coming up next. I really think that, honestly, they're going to get to like 6 wins before they play Optics. So New York's going to get a top seed going to this event. We'll see how these 4 teams match up in the bracket, especially in winners round 2, likely where we'll start to see some of them face off. All right, so let's do this. I don't think I'm going to put anybody in potential contenders. Honestly, right now, I wanted to put Minnesota there, but I got to be honest, we got to move them down here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to delete this row as well. Let's talk about the Rocker, because they have continued to just toss close series again. They have really tough game 5 loss week 1. This week, they should have closed it out against Optic map 3. Should have closed it out with opportunities in map 4. Didn't. And then they got slammed map 5, so they lost that one. In the Boston series, I thought were very questionable vetoes out of them. They played Boston on Invasion. Boston really battled hard in the hard point. The next 2 maps were pretty close that Rocker took. And then Rocker couldn't close out sub base. And then, let me know if you've heard it again, they lose a Karachi S&D and they get fried. So this Rocker team cannot close out series. I think it's at this point pretty clear that their game 5 record is trash. It's pretty clear right now that they have a big problem in this current stretch, really closing teams out. They're 2 and 8 out of 10 game 4s this year, which is not good. This team has to figure out how to close series, because I like the talent on this team. They're good enough to be top 6. They're good enough to get deep at these events. They're good enough, I think, on a hot weekend to make it to winners finals, but I'm never going to trust them right now against the top 4 teams in clutch situations. And unfortunately for right now, until they work on that, I cannot put them up in potential contenders. And let's also clean this text, because I don't think this roster change stuff really matters at this point. All right, next up we have the Boston Breach, and a mixed weekend for them, but I think progress. I think if you're Boston, I think you're slowly starting to get into a decent spot. They got slammed by New York. We're not going to like really sugarcoat it. That series to open up Friday was bad, and they got slammed. But they battled, as we said, against Minnesota and clutched up a game 5. And as long as this team can continue to make pathways in S&D, I think I'm high on that, and that's going to kind of limit their ceiling for me moving them up the contenders, because I do think, unfortunately, against top teams, they're going to have tough in these matchups, because their map pool and hard point seems to be decent, but the S&D map pool is really not. And control, I think, continues to be hot and cold for them. So I think they're there or thereabouts. Should they be able to consistently beat a lot of the teams below them? Yeah, we'll see. But I think Boston should be good value to challenge for that last or second to last spot in winners. They're 2-1 right now. They have Vegas coming up, Optic and FaZe, which are 3 very difficult games, because Vegas actually been playing pretty decent as of late. And then you've got Seattle to close it out. So I think they get 3 wins, because I think Seattle's a series they should win. There's a question if they'll get a 4th win with those other 3. The problem with 3 is that really only puts you in like the 7th or 8th spot. So they're going to have a tough winners round 1 matchup, to be honest, from there. All right, next up we have the Miami Heretics, and unfortunately we got to move these guys down here. This team is absolutely and utterly on a slide right now. This weekend they lost the game 5 to Vegas. They battled hard in that one. They came up short, and they lost game 5 to Thieves, and they battled that one and came up short. And yes, they're having chances in these series. Against Vegas, they went up 2-0 and couldn't close out. Against Thieves, Thieves went up 2-0 and almost threw that series, and then it went down to round 11 on Terminal. But I just think now that they're on like a 6-game slide, I think. They've lost on Thieves, Vegas, FaZe, Toronto, Vegas, and Optic now. 6 in a row going back to the major. I think we got to put them in missing pieces until they figure it out. This may be a situation where maybe Real comes in a roster change situation post-major. I don't know, but they got New York, Carolina, and Rocker coming out, and I'm gonna be honest to you, I think they're gonna end up with 1 win starting in losers during this stage. All right, let's do LA Thieves. I'm gonna move them down here and Vegas up here. We'll get to Vegas in a second. For Thieves, you know what? You got the W. You got on board after a stinky against Optic last week. You barely scraped by against Miami. Barely. Like, yeah. But my point is, I don't know if this team's good yet. And I still think that there's a lot of inconsistency here. I think Afro's really struggling. I think we haven't gotten a great series from Nash yet. It's been 2 games. Kremp has been but all the same issues of this team still exist. They just barely got through in this series by the skin of their teeth. But they got Minnesota, FaZe, Vegas coming up. It's not This schedule is very tough for Thieves. LAG and then Toronto. I just don't see it, man. I really just don't. So hopefully they figure out a vein of form here and get going. But I think they're going to be starting losers once again. And I really think this team might make another roster change after Major 3. But let's talk about Vegas. The surprise package during this split so far. And look, I moved them up even though they lost to Toronto this week. But they did also beat Miami. So they went 1-1. Right now, this team is sitting at 2-1 during this split. They've got Boston, Thieves, Seattle, and Carolina. So I honestly believe that Vegas is going to make winners bracket, and they're playing some solid COD right now. We have to tip it. They look and have seem to have improved in control, which is a huge weakness for them last split. No reason they were getting reverse swept in a lot of series. Yes, D has been okay. The hard point has been okay, but they're grinding these series out against teams at or slightly below their level. I feel good about putting them in work to do. I'm not convinced this team is consistent enough to move them up a tier. They've done enough to really vault them in this conversation. I'm actually going to put them in front of Boston right now based on the way they play. And they're going to play Boston next. So we'll decide how to order it after that. But feel pretty good about that top 7 right now. It's just a question of who may join them amongst the 8 teams making it to winners bracket. All right, next up we have the Los Angeles Guerrillas. And really not much of a note from them this week. They played Optic. They won first map, Karachi, pretty convincingly actually against Optic. Optic started really slow on that one. It didn't play that map well, but then Optic really kicked it up from there and won it pretty convincingly afterwards. I just think this LAG team doesn't have the talent to really hold a candle to teams right now. I just think between Diamondcon and Assault, one's gonna have to go, guys. Like I think they need a little bit more speed. I just think that may have worked out in the beginning of the game, but now that you really need a really talented flex player, I just don't see it with those two kind of splitting that role, and they just kind of have limited upside on a map like Rio with their squad. And Vista comes in, Departures come in, which are a little bit smaller maps than we got with like an Invasion. This team's going to continue to struggle. They've been really poor in hard points so far for these 2 matches. They've been poor in control. Just don't see it for these guys, man. I really don't. And coming up next, they've got Seattle and Carolina. So potentially some opportunities here against some teams at this level to get some wins on the board, but I don't know, man. I don't know if they're gonna get the 8th spot here. Next up, we have the Carolina Royal Ravens. Only 1 match this week against Seattle, and they went ahead and took that one 3-1 with Seattle, taking a terminal S&D in which Alec played very well. I'm gonna move them above Miami before Thieves right now, but I think this could obviously shuffle around a little bit because for me, I see that their schedule is not particularly easy. They have Optic coming up next, but after that, LAG, Miami, and Vegas. There's a lot of opportunity for this team to maybe go 1-1 over that split. But I think really like the Boston series was a huge opportunity for them to get a potential win. I just think not likely to get the 8th spot. Be an unlucky team in losers bracket. I think the biggest thing is they just need more consistency from fellows. So they got that a little bit last series. They started to look a little bit better in S&D. I'm just worried about the respawns with them against teams, and they just have to be on their best to be able to hold a candle in those modes. So we'll see what they can do. All right, the last team on the list, and I'm going to put them in last, is the Seattle Surge, and it's just more misery for this team. We talked about their loss to Carolina. I just don't know what to say about this team right now. They just suck. They just suck. They were not a good respawn team before this stage, and they haven't won a respawn so far through 2 matches. So I don't care if you go to Search Squad. If they can't win a hard point or control to save them lives, they're getting 0 points to split. It's just tough, obviously, with Ender being out and them trying to figure out where Brezzy, but just this team's a broken team right now. And I don't want to waste too much oxygen on it because they're just bad. And they got Toronto coming up. That's not a win. LAG, maybe. Rocker. I assume Rocker don't throw that. Vegas look good. And then Boston to close out. They legitimately might go this whole split online and not win a match. I truly believe that. All right, so let's take a look at the order and make sure I feel good about it. Toronto, FaZe, New York, Optic. Yeah. Minnesota, Vegas, Boston. Okay. And then the missing pieces situation here. Thieves. Do I want to put Thieves in front of like Carolina? You know, put LAG in front of Miami is a great question. Like, who do I think has played better over this split? I feel like Miami has, just barely. It's just like, how do I order Thieves in Carolina is the hardest part. Do I leave it as is? Do I like move it? I don't know. They're not going to play during this split. So I'm not really sure how I want to position both of those teams because one is 1-2 and one is 1-1. I'm going to leave it as is for now. I think this bottom 5 could shuffle, but where this tier list is right now is where I truly believe that only 4 teams can legitimately win an event. I think the next three have some interesting veteran presence and some youngsters that if they really click on a weekend, they might be able to challenge. But I think the percentage chances that are extremely low and not enough for me to put them in potential contenders. And then the 5 teams below that are a mix of teams that I think are making a roster change or just made a roster change and honestly still aren't good enough to really climb for that last winner's bracket spot. Like, I honestly believe that this 7 and then probably like, I don't know, Carolina or Thieves is going to take this spot, but who knows? We still got a lot of COD to play for in this split before we head off to Florida for Major 2. So let me know in the comments what you think of the video. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more. And as always, guys, we will see you on the next one.